Welcome to Careers in Discovery, your window into the world of biotech leaders. On each episode, we interview the industry's leading executives to understand how they built their careers, what they've learned along the way, and the advice they'd give to their younger selves. This time I'm with Annelise Vuidepot, Chief Technology Officer at Immunocore, one of the UK's most successful biotech companies. Annelise was at Immunocore on day one, and she's been at the heart of the company's pioneering work in T-cell receptor-based therapies ever since. We talked about building a new technology from scratch, the long road to their first approved drug, what it takes to lead through 25 years of change, and how Immunocore maintained their strong, unified culture. It's a fascinating conversation. Come and join us. I'm delighted to be here in person this time on Careers in Discovery with Annelise Vuidepot of Immunocore. Annelise, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you for joining us. I feel like we've been sort of skirting around this conversation for a few years now, so it's great to finally see you. Very exciting time at Immunocore, lots going on. Tell us a bit about the business, your role. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so Immunocore has been in existence, as you know, for 25 years now, and we develop drugs. We work in the field of immunotherapy.
Yes.
So that's where, you know, this new generation of drugs where the people's own immune system are engaged to fight the disease. And we develop what we call soluble bispecific off-the-shelf drugs. And so one end of the molecule targets the cancer cell in the case of oncology, the other end of the molecule recruit people's immune system to kill the cancer cells. So for a long time we were focused on oncology.
Yes.
And so our first most advanced program now has reached, as you say, commercial stage. So the drug was approved 3 years ago. And coming after that, we have a pipeline of other drugs that are currently in clinical trials to address, other indications, other cancer types. We've also developed a platform to address infectious diseases. So we've got also a pipeline in the clinic at the clinical stage for HIV and HBV. But more recently, we've also adapted the platform to be able to address autoimmune diseases.
Okay.
So that's really a big expansion of the platform that has huge potential. So that's the latest really exciting development of our technology.
And that makes sense in that if you're already recruiting the immune system, then I imagine there's a slight adaptation then to look at, well, where's the immune system going wrong? And it makes total
exactly
sense.
So the part of the technology can still be used, the part that where we target either the cancer cell or the infected cell or the tissue that is being under attack. But in the case of autoimmune, obviously we don't want to destroy those cells, we want to protect them.
Right.
So that's why the other end of the molecule had to be changed in order to be able to achieve that.
Yes, I see. And as you said, 25 years of the company, and we were talking just before we started recording, your career has been very intertwined with it. You were here on the first day.
Yes.
And you're here today as well. So we'll get into that part of the story and really interested to hear about it. But things must have changed quite a lot in terms of the business, but also just the biotech environment that you've seen over the last 25 years.
Yeah, so when we started, it was year 2000, we embarked on a journey to build a completely new technology.
Right.
So at the time, really nobody else was working in that field. Everybody was really focused on antibody-based therapies, where we did decide to focus on T-cell receptor-based therapies. And the main purpose of that was to be able to access, more targets so that we would deliver drugs that would be really specific for cancer. So wouldn't have off-tumor activity that would lead to toxicity.
Yes.
So that was really the main reason. So it took about 10 years to build that technology, and so our first program entered the clinic in 2010.
Yep.
And all that time, so we were very much working in isolation, if you like. And that's really tough because, it's exciting in some ways, that it's really pioneering work, but at the same time, when you're on your own, you can't learn from anybody else.
Yes.
So it's a lot of trial and error, and that's why it took 10 years.
Right, yeah, exactly.
But what really changed after that, so we had that first program going into the clinic, and when it did show sign of activity and efficacy in patients, that's when it raised interest.
Of course.
And then since then, a lot of people, a lot of groups and companies have either joined in that search for that kind of therapies, or new companies have been set up to also use that kind of technology. So yeah, that the field has changed a lot over those years, but also in the just in general in the immunotherapy field, we see also the antibody-based therapies have also progressed a lot, and there's lots of hope there as well for even better drugs coming up.
Absolutely, and I think it seems that every step we take forward in immune therapies of all types shows how many more steps we could take, right? And there's so much more space to explore.
Yeah, exactly. Because also, again, when you build a new technology, there's so much that you don't understand, obviously, from day one, and you have to figure it out.
Yes.
So there's pioneering at the beginning about just building the technology, but the pioneering goes all the way through the clinical development, even the commercialization, when it's completely new drug and new mechanism of action. There's so much to understand.
Yes.
It doesn't happen overnight, that's for sure.
No, absolutely. And so today you're the Chief Technology Officer. Tell us a bit about what that entails. Where do you spend your time? What's the scope of that role?
So technically I have got two roles. So my scientific role is I'm Chief Technology Officer. And that means that, so I'm in charge of all the drug development, drug discovery pipeline.
Yes.
So preclinical stage, right up to IND submission, so regulatory submission for clinical trial. But the other part that I'm in charge of is to develop the platform further.
Right.
So as we just said, we set up a new technology, then we've got the proof of concept in the clinic.
Yes.
And now we need to generate, the next generation of those drugs. And that's why, we're at uniquely at really exciting time, because now we've got these drugs in the clinic, we're starting to learn so much from patients. Yes. That gives us a lot of insight about, what's limiting the efficacy in patient, what's driving it.
Yeah.
And that then goes back to research and really focus us on doing the research that will make the drug better.
Yeah, I see. Okay, that's interesting. So there's a view from further down the pipe, from the life cycle, that's informing even the very early research now. And how does that change the way that you approach that early research?
So there are two kind of feedback loops that are really important.
Yes.
One is with translational medicine group. So they're the group who analyze patient samples.
Yep.
And they look at markers, how the drug is actually really working in patients. And that gives us insight about maybe what makes a good target, what makes a good effector function,
right.
And what the ideal patient is that can drive us also to adapt our molecule for mechanism of action and all that. That's one part, but the other, more recently, obviously, that we've reached the commercial stage. Now we also have a lot of experience on the ground how the drug is used.
Yes.
And that's really important also to feedback to research, because at the end of the day, we want to develop drugs that doctors and patients are going to want to use, and that's going to make a difference for them.
Yes.
So that's another feedback loop that is starting now to make sure that we align, with the medical community.
Yeah, and you're able to do that now.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
And because initially, when it's at the research stage of an organization, we're very much focused on the science.
Yes.
And making a drug that is going to be efficacious. But then after, when you start using it in the real world, you also, you have to take into consideration the quality of life and, and the convenience, that kind of thing. So all this feedback also has to come back. And that's where we are now, collecting that feedback to make sure that we also deliver drugs that, is really going to be efficacious, but also really helpful for patients.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, as you move towards before the drug was commercialized, as you move towards commercialization, I imagine you start thinking about those things, but it's kind of speculation at that point, right? Now you've got the actual data and you can see that.
Yeah, and speculation is a really good word, because generally that's where it's so exciting now that we're at that stage. Because especially when it's a new technology, you just operate with ideas and concepts, but rarely things work in the way you imagine that they would. So now getting all these insights is really helpful to guide us to really refine the technology. Yeah. So that's the part. So that's where we started. So that's the other part that I'm responsible for, to make sure that we develop the platform further.
Yeah.
And so that's my scientific role. I'm also the Immunocore UK site head.
Yes.
So I'm heading up this site here. So we have now 3 sites, so one in the UK, which is the original one, obviously, but we've got also 2 sites in the US as well.
Yes.
So so I've got a site team here to work with me on internal engagement, making sure the site is safe, fit for purpose.
Of course, yeah.
And where we can also foster the best possible environment for innovation.
Yes.
That's obviously really critical for our business.
Yeah.
And also doing some work externally to make sure we connect Immunocore in the scientific community.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Not just with other biotech, but also other academic institutions.
Yes.
And that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm really interested to come back. We'll take a little detour, but because I want to talk about your career and your path to Immunocore as well. But I'm really interested to come back to this and talk about kind of some of the different phases the company has gone through and some of the ways that's changed your role and all that kind of thing. Because I think these points of transition I find fascinating. When you go into the clinic and when you release a product, and then now you're using that as a feedback loop. But there's been from what I've seen from the outside, there's been a constant focus on continuing to innovate and continuing to drive the pipeline and that kind of thing. And that's a really interesting balance, I think, to maintain. So I'll come back and ask you some more about that in a bit. But going all the way back, as we like to do on this podcast, why science for you, Annelise, and why chemistry originally and then moving into biology? Why this career?
So it all started when I was 15.
Okay.
That's when I decided that I wanted to do chemistry. So I discovered, at school, like chemical reaction and all the, particles.
Yes.
And I was really fascinated by that. At that, before that, I hadn't really decided science. Or I was interested in lots of things. Okay. I loved my teacher of history, so I thought, maybe I could be an archaeologist or something. Okay. But no, I discovered chemistry. I absolutely loved it, and I decided. So I decided, like youngish, I wanted to do chemistry, and that's what I studied at university. So I have a master in chemistry. Yes. And the thing is that I loved studying chemistry, but when I started to think about the jobs that would lead me to, I had very little knowledge and understanding of where chemistry could be applied. Yes. And in my head, it was only chemistry of like materials and polymers and things like that, which didn't really appeal to me. So I made and during my master, I had a module that was called bioorganic chemistry. Okay. And that was to study, the interaction between the drugs and bodies. So like the interaction between an antibiotic and the bacteria. I see, yeah. That kind of thing. And I was really fascinated. And that's why I thought that maybe, things related to the body really, more interest to me. Rather, I found, chemistry maybe too dry in my limited knowledge again. Yes, yeah. So I moved, so I did my PhD in biophysics. And where I was using biophysical methods to study interaction between protein and DNA. And that's where I got really interested in that side of thing. And that's the first time I had to produce my own protein. So I discovered biochemistry. Yes. And lab work, like wet lab work. And I really liked it. So at that point, that's when I came to the UK after my PhD to do a postdoc. Yes. At UCL. And again, I was in like a biophysical environment using the same techniques, but at that point I had to do a lot more biochemistry and molecular biology. Yeah, I see. And at that point I decided that's really what I want to do. That's the route, yeah. So after 2 years of postdoc, that's when I applied for jobs in biotech. So I was at that time, I knew already that I didn't want to stay in academia.
Yes.
But I did that postdoc really mainly to learn English.
Okay, fair enough.
My English was non-existent at the time.
Yeah.
So, and for a scientist, that's not great. So, but after 2 years, that's where I decided, I guess my English was decent enough to try and get a job. And so that's when I joined the company.
Yes.
But I think very early on, so when I made that decision of moving away from chemistry, is because I never realized that you could use also chemistry in the healthcare and pharma and biotech. But I always had that I really wanted. So from a very young age, I was really obsessed with the life and death and living. I mean, everybody has different beliefs, right? But my personal belief is that, you've got only one shot at this.
Right, yeah.
So really that obsession about, having a life as long and as good as possible.
Yes, okay.
And that's why I really wanted to be in an environment where somehow I could contribute to helping people, live longer.
Yes.
And that's where, interestingly, that's where also my mindset changed a little bit.
Okay.
So at that time when I decided to move, that was what I had in mind, helping people to live longer.
Right.
But now, for also personal experience and everything, now I realize also the importance of quality of life.
Yes.
It's not just about living longer,
yes.
but it has to be, a life with a certain quality.
Yes.
And that's why now I'm really... I'm so engaged in that piece about getting that feedback from patients and doctors to make sure that we don't miss that piece.
Yes.
Extremely important.
Well, there's this whole focus now on health span rather than lifespan, isn't there? And as you say, quality being at least as important as quantity. You don't want to spend the last 40% of your life in chronic pain and these kinds of things if you don't need to, right? So.
And that's why I'm so excited about the development of the platform for autoimmune disease, because as the population ages, there's more and more of those chronic autoimmune diseases that are really, really bad for the quality of life. And that's where now I think, with this technology, we could really make a difference.
Well, I think it's fascinating, isn't it? As the technology advances, not just in drugs, but in they're talking about 3D printing lungs now and this sort of thing, aren't they? And we're reaching a crossover point, aren't we, where the lifespan and health span could be extended significantly. But it's cancer treatment is going to be a key part of that, because half of us are going to encounter it at some point in our life, right? So it must be, if that was the motivation that brought you into it originally, it must be so satisfying now that you see all this research you've been doing actually delivering that for patients.
Absolutely. And I remember that when that first drug went to the clinic and we started to collect data, and with the first scans we saw of patients where we could see their tumor shrinking, that's like a concrete crystallization of my purpose, if you like. So that's extremely rewarding.
Yes.
I mean, it's I was saying it's extremely painful to build something new, but when you get to that stage and you see you're rewarded by something like that, it all disappears.
And you may or may not be able to hear this on the podcast, but I can sense the enthusiasm coming from you still here, so that's great to see. So 2000, joining what was then Avidex, became Immunocore later on. Very different to the place that I've just walked in today, I would imagine. Yes. Take us back there.
So when I joined, literally on the first day of the company, so the company was a spin-off from Oxford University.
Yes.
So the founder was running a lab in Oxford, and at some point people say, that there was definitely a translational element that was becoming obvious in what he was working on. So they decided, to form this company to really build that technology. So that's when I joined on that first day back in 2000. We were only 15, so I was one of 6-7 scientists, and obviously the first at least the first 8 years where we were focused on building the technology, that was purely a research organization. So obviously with some very light structure, a skeleton of support functions. But the whole purpose of the organization was research.
Yes.
And that's where it's really interesting to see the evolution of the company, and also touching on the culture, because as we progress, then you have to build the other functions.
Yes.
So after that, we had to build some CMC capacity, manufacturing capability, and then after that, the clinical teams, and then more recently, commercial teams.
Yes.
And all that. So it is interesting because scientists tend to be at the very early stage. They tend to be, the center of the world of that organization.
Exactly, yeah.
And as you add on the other, they kind of share that. So we were always very mindful of growing the organization, but in a way that people would feel, they're all part of the organization, and it's not becoming a competition.
I think this is a really interesting point. I think because all biotechs will go through these transitions if they're successful, right? And if their research advances, and if they can stay funded, and all those ifs that come along with it. There's very few that make it 25 years, and there's very few that make it to the finish line full stop, right? Say finish line, the commercial point, full stop. The observation I have about this evolution of a company's culture, you've touched on it there. You bring in all different types of people, different mindsets, different ways of looking at the world as the company advances. And sort of when you're in that very early, and this might have been actually even before the company span out, but when you're in that very early research stage, it's very open, you can explore things, it's creative, innovative,
informal,
informal, just figure stuff out, figure out a path, right? And then as you start nominating candidates, and you start doing INDs, and then you have to put more structure, and then even more so in the clinic, and as things come towards commercial stage, then I guess it gets more about effectiveness, repeatability, optimizing. A, you're spending more money, but B, also you're then looking at, well, how do we get a return on this? And of course, then there's the whole IPO thing and fundraising as you go along, and all that kind of stuff that comes with it. My observation is that a lot of biotech companies don't do a great job of managing those transitions, and that's often where things go wrong, or when they have to change the whole leadership, and that hasn't been the case here. I'm sure there were things that went better than others. But touching on what we talked about earlier as well, and you talked about it then, is there's always been this maintenance of research being the core of the company and the scientists being heavily valued, and this is partly what's resulted in such a strong pipeline for the company. Right? This is a big question that I seem to have built up to for quite a long time now, but what do you think has been the core reason that Immunocore has been able to do that, where so many others haven't? What's the cultural element, or what are your observations, I suppose, about all those transitions the company's been through? This is a question I haven't prepared you for, I appreciate. It's
something I've been thinking about myself, because we always need to take the lessons and use it for the next experience. So I think that it's not like, I think that part of the reason we've been successful is that obviously the science is very strong.
Right.
At the end of the day, that's what makes. But the thing, my big learning is that it's not enough. So you can have the best technology in the world, even produce the best molecule in the world, if your purpose and your end goal is to help patients.
Yes.
It has to go all the way there, and it can, even with the best possible molecule, it can fail along the way.
Absolutely.
Because clinical trials are not well designed, because it can be lots of things.
Yes.
So I think that's where having a team, a very experienced team, who've experienced developing drugs. That's really important, and also each area. So I think that's where the purpose is really important, because I was touching on that before, that you have the different functions, and that they shouldn't see themselves as being like in competition.
Yes.
They're part of one thing. And if the goal is really to make drugs that are going to make a difference for patients, and you want to go all the way there, that's where that's the unifying thing for all these functions.
So
and I guess, that's something that we've used.
Yeah, so keeping that mission, that purpose really central to everything.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. It's absolutely, as you say, you have to have great science, right? That's kind of the entry stage.
Yes, that's the
yeah.
But my big learning is that it's not enough.
And to be fair, this is not what this podcast is about, but this is kind of the reason that Singular exists, is that because it's actually not usually the science or the money that are the underlying cause of companies failing in biotech. It's the team and the culture, and that's not a criticism. It's just that if you look at any successful biotech company, and especially the very, very successful ones, the Amgens, the Genentechs of the world, it's not that they didn't have things fail, or they didn't have setbacks. Some of them had huge phase 3 failures of their lead programs and this kind of stuff, but they managed to find a way through them. And I'm sure there's been setbacks and challenges here as well over that time, and it's so keeping people centralized and focused on that mission, you think has been really
I think
important.
that's really the thing that can really unify people, and working as one, that's really essential. But along the way, so we had between 2013 and 17, we had this massive expansion because we signed drug discovery partnership deals.
Yes.
So we had to build the teams to fulfill those. So we grew from about 50 to 500 employees, and that's really the challenging.
In about 4 years, you said that was. Yeah, okay.
So that's extremely challenging, to cope with that kind of growth. And some of it, I think that's where, sometimes it's really difficult. And I guess that's where some companies sometimes really make mistakes. And we have made our own mistakes.
Yes.
Because some things, come as an afterthought. And sometimes you just, that expansion gets away from you. And it's nothing, it's not like everything is really well planned and everything. So looking back, you're like, we should have. So, but, that's, I think that's how it is, with the expansions. So the thing that we really paid attention to was the culture.
Right, okay.
So when we were, recruiting scientists, we really put a lot of emphasis on the character, whether there would be a good fit also culturally, etc. Because we felt that for a lot of the things we do, we could train people, so that they don't necessarily have to have, the experience and have already done it. But we were really looking for cultural fit as well. That was really important.
Yeah, because I think there's points where you have to bring in people who've been there and done it, right? But if you if you have to do that in every position, that's a very expensive way to grow a company. And as you say, bringing people up in the culture of the company is very important as well, isn't it? There's also, I suppose, those elements to which you don't know what things are the essence of what's making it work until things break as well, right? So, there'll be things about that 50-person group that make it special that you don't realise until actually you've looked back and gone, we've lost touch with that, or we need to get back to that, or that kind of thing.
But that can be good and bad, because it's really, that early culture is so important.
Yes.
Because things just get perpetrated. Even when people leave and new people join, there's some things that just carry on.
Yes.
And it could be the good or the bad. So it's something really, that early phase of the company culture is really something to pay attention to.
There's a psychological experiment they ran in, I think this is quite an inhumane experiment, so I think it was in the 50s or 60s that they ran this, but they got a bunch of monkeys and they basically put food at the top of this cage, and there was a ladder going up to the food, and I think there was 5 or 6 monkeys in the cage, and the first one went up, and as soon as they touched the food, all the monkeys got electrocuted. And so the next one went up and tried it again. This happened over and over again until when any monkey tried to go up the ladder, all the other monkeys attacked that monkey and pulled it down. And then what they did was they gradually replaced the monkeys. And it got to the point where in this experiment, none of the monkeys that had originally been in the cage when the electrocution happened were there anymore, but they still would attack the monkeys for going up the ladder, and they didn't know why, but it was just ingrained in them. And it's that sort of like...
Because they had seen it.
Yeah. Hopefully people aren't attacking each other. But
I see what you mean.
I always found that fascinating, is that learned behaviour, even when there's no clear reason for it, as you say, perpetrates through... Yeah,
because there's all those subconscious things that are, come with behaviours.
Yes.
So you don't, consciously think about it, but it's in the background.
Yeah.
And you absorb it.
And then I suppose there's also that element that you have to retain the culture, but then you also have to evolve it, right? Because that culture that you had when there was 15 of you doing early stage research, there's elements you want to keep, but that culture in its entirety wouldn't be effective in the sort of business that you are today. Yeah. Any thoughts on evolving that as objectives shift and stakes raise and pressures shift and things like that?
No, I think that's absolutely right, but I think it's the evolution also, as you acquire all those other functions, evolution of the skill sets and the people who come. But I think that it's just something really to pay attention to.
Yes.
And it's challenging, but I can't.
No, that's fine. Fine. We've gone off track a little bit anyway. I could talk about this all day, so I'm going to bring us back to you. So you joined the company as a senior scientist. You're part of that core research team, and as you say, now you are in charge of the platform and in charge of the site, and your role has changed significantly over that time. If you look at your journey, not necessarily as a scientist, but I suppose your journey in building your career, are there key things that you look back on as sort of key lessons that you've learned along the way that have been really influential for you and have enabled that progress?
So I think the one big thing I can see is that, and that I would advise people also, is really to to follow what you really like. I think that I think I was. Well, I think, obviously we're all different, but I think I was lucky in a way that there was never, expectations put on me, from my parents, for example, to do anything, And so that's why I never had any pressure to go one way or another. I felt that I really had the freedom to follow what interested me and what I liked. And I think this is so important because I've seen so many times people, scientists, making decision between what they know deep down they really like and what they think they should do.
Yes.
Because they think, if I, that's what I like, but if I do that, this will bring me more progression in my career and that kind of thing. And in my experience, that never ends well. So I think identifying really early what really interests you and what you really like and really follow that. And not think too much about, from day one about, career progression and how, what's the fastest way for me to get there.
Yes.
I strongly believe that because I really feel there's a connection between what you like and what you're going to be good at.
Yes.
And I don't know, I have to say, I don't know which influences which. So is it that because you really like something, you're going to put the effort in and you're going to become good at it?
Yes.
Or is it because you're good at something, it's rewarding, and then that drives you to do more of that? I don't know, but the two are definitely connected.
Definitely. And you see it with children all the time, don't you? There's some things they just drop and they never progress with, and then some things they stick with and they get better and better at. And it's, my personal view is we don't actually change that much as we get older. We just get better at telling a story around the behaviour that we have. But I think you're right. I think you spend so much of your time at work that it would be a shame to make the decision about how you spend that time for someone else's reasons, right? Which is what a lot of people do, as you say, what they think they should do.
Yeah. So and I've been obviously thinking a lot about that because I've got a son who's 22. Okay. So I was very conscious of that, trying to not influence him, let him discover his own thing, and now he actually found the thing that really interests him, and now he's really self-propelled. Yes. Yeah. Which is really nice. So I think for me that's the biggest thing. Make sure that to identify early, what you really like, and then really pursue it. Yes. And not being distracted by what you should be doing, according to other people. Yeah.
And I would imagine, like everybody, there's been times where you've been super connected to what you're doing, and then there's been times where it's been frustrating and things like that. Has it always been clear that this was the path to stay on for you? You know, what's kept you? I guess because it is so unusual for a company to exist for 25 years in this sector, first of all, but for someone to be there for that time. What do you think has kept you personally on this path?
So that's interesting because I actually did leave the company at some point. So back in 2004.
Yes.
And at that point, I was still in that space. You know, I really liked it, but still not sure whether I should explore all the things.
It's the first company you'd worked for.
Exactly. So you know, what else could I be doing, kind of thing. So I left and I went to Switzerland, and I worked for a big company there. So completely opposite end of the spectrum, like multinational company, really huge. Yes. And I was not working in the lab anymore. It was not a healthcare company. So and again, so I could have seen, so and in the end, you know, I wasn't really happy there.
Right.
I didn't in the end like the job I had there, and so I could have seen that as a failure or something. But I did not. I thought it was so extremely useful, this experience, because by doing something I didn't really like, it made me realize what I really liked.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I see.
So it was very positive that way. So that's why, you know, I came back to the comic because I discovered, you know, this is really what I want to do. I'm sure now. I'm sure this is it.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's good. And I guess as you get closer and closer to realizing the result of all those years of work, it gets easier to see it through and
then to see that, because obviously that's the difficulty at the early stage, you know, when your purpose is to help patients in some ways. At that beginning, you know, you're so far from it that it's and it takes such a long time and such, you know, trial and errors and kind of failures and all that. So that's my other big thing is that the mindset around, you know, what we call failure.
Right.
So in the research environment, especially when you build something new, 90% of the experiments are not going to give you the result you want.
Yes.
So it's easy to be really discouraged and think, you know, there's no point or whatever. But I think that you have to be, you know, successful in that kind of environment. You have to have the mindset that each experiment, even if it doesn't give the result you want, it gives you a result that can be used to learn and to move on to the next stage.
Yes.
So you see this as a journey and not just as a, you know, success or failure.
No, exactly.
So the resilience is extremely important.
Yes.
And having that kind of mindset, how you see what you call, you know, failure or things like that, that's really important.
I think that's absolutely true, and I think especially for younger people today, maybe this is something that your son's experienced. They don't see the failure because everything that's on display is success, right? Everything on social media, everything that's presented looks like other people don't go through the failures.
Yeah,
they're just not sharing them,
true.
Right?
Everything is perfect.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
So, so they're probably not that well prepared for that.
Yeah. But, you know, I just wanted to touch on something that you said earlier about don't focus too much on career progression, focus on what you enjoy doing. And I think that's really important. Your career has progressed. You know, you've moved into an executive leadership position and done that over the years. Is there anything, any advice you'd give that you think has maybe helped you to progress your career? If career progression hasn't been the goal, I know that's those two things don't always go together, but what do you think has made you successful in your career?
So I mean, part of it is what I said. You just follow what I enjoy doing, and not being distracted too much with status and you know, that kind of thing, and the next promotion and that kind of thing. I think the other thing in our environment, what's really important is to keep the curiosity. Okay. I think that's another element. I love learning new things. Yes. And that's my big thing, you know, I love to discover new areas, and because then can see how it connects with what I already know, and that, you know, I think that's really important for innovation and creativity. Yes. So keeping that in the field where you've been working for a while, keeping that scientific engagement, that curiosity, wanting to learn, you know what's happening in that field, that what more can be done, what new technologies are coming up, and I think that's really important to be, successful in a career in science.
Yeah, So at that point where, as you said, when you started out, you guys were the only TCR therapy company really, and you were ploughing this furrow alone, and then more and more companies joined that. Did you see that as an exciting development? Was that interesting for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you were asking me, kind of what kept me here for so long. And that's definitely one of the things. Okay. So that pioneering element, it's really tough. And you have to have the right mindset for it.
Yes.
But I find it extremely rewarding. The knowing that you're great, you're making new ground.
Yes.
You're doing something that nobody else has done before.
Yes.
Yeah, I get a big kick out of that.
Yeah, fair enough. And it's nice to see other people following, I guess, because there's always going to be those moments, if you're doing something genuinely new, there's always going to be those moments where you think, hang on, are we the crazy ones, actually?
Especially when, very often when you do something new that is a bit out there, a lot of people are telling you this is never going to work.
Yes, of course.
So we had a lot of that.
Yeah.
Yes, and but again, so being at that say where it's a close team, you've got the right culture, you're clear on your mission, you're clear, what you want to achieve, then you just ignore that noise.
Yeah, of course.
Have to.
So this may be stuff we've already covered, and it may be that we've already talked about this, but any final pieces of advice that you'd leave people with? Maybe if you bumped into yourself on that day in 2000 when you were first walking through the door, anything you'd say that you think would be helpful? Yeah,
I can't really think of anything else, that
okay.
I have already mentioned. Those are really the main elements, the resilience, be prepared, especially, when you engage in that kind of work, the mindset, and curiosity, staying really engaged with the science, so keep the purpose in mind.
No, fair. I think they're all really important points. Yeah. So Annelise, thank you for coming on. It's great to see that passion still there after all this time on this project, and lots of new things coming through, and I'm sure all stoking your curiosity and making it even more exciting. But no, best of luck for this next phase, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please like and subscribe and share it with someone else you think will benefit. And for more podcasts, videos, blogs and insights, come follow me, Tom Froggatt, on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, Medium or TikTok. See you next time.